now for 2023. And I'm excited to share with you all that our topic for today is how to support your small business client in raising business finance. As you know, SEDA, IBASA, and the EPI invite you to these CBD webinars, and these happen every month. And as you, it will happen from January again, right up until December as usual. And really, it is a partnership between these three organizations, SEDA, IBASA, and the EPI, that we're able to bring such a thing. And really, why we decided to really look at this topic, it's because we found that, access to finance, according to small business owners, is a big constraint that prevents them from making or use a ready opportunity. So sometimes we don't see those opportunities or use those opportunities. So as we might know, some of the experiences might be truths that they've experienced, some might not be, and we all have different challenges. So instead of us having assumptions, I'm excited really to introduce you to Nikita Mfenyana. He's the Regional Consultant Manager for Business Partners. So his experience has really been about business financing environment, and it spans over 25 years. So he has a lot. 25 years plus, I'm sure it's even more than 25 years. And of course, his experience has included in property, in tourism, in the franchising business. And he was part of the unit of the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation. So I'm really excited that as a prior civil infrastructure and construction, and being a construction engineer, he's now used all those learning, all that experience, and said, hey, let me bring it here to the entrepreneurial space. Let me bring it here to develop our country, our people. And it was so exciting yesterday. I disturbed him on a call and was busy with business with 10 pitches. Sorry, I'm bringing that in now on that. And he was like, and it was like, startups, so that tickled my heart, by the way, Nikita, because it wasn't like you're working for this big organization and you're only focusing on the top end, but you're also taking care of the startups and the little people that become the big people eventually. And on that, without any further ado, I really hand over to you, Nikita Mfenyana. Engos.
Thank you, Sister Becca. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, in terms of just the what Sister Becca was talking about, Business Partners has, as part of its corporate social responsibility, we conduct a business plan competition once a year for aspiring entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, who have not usually yet started a business but want to, and the competition is about getting them to workshop, and then after that having over a period of 4 to 5 weeks preparing a business plan and then submitting it. And so yesterday we were busy with the judging of the 10 finalists. Exciting stuff, as I was saying to Sister Becca, also because a lot of them are from the rural parts of South Africa, and it's all national. But anyway, to get on to today's topic, I would like to first see if I can share my screen and pull that up. Okay, can everybody see that? Maybe, okay, good. All right. So I think in terms of the process, I'd like this to be interactive. At the same time, I do have to get through the slides within 20 minutes, which is what I was given. So I'm going to try and put on my timer, which shouldn't stop people from asking questions. And hopefully one of my co-hosts can let me know if there's a question that's pertinent to the particular slide we're on or to the slide thereafter. So to kick off, I'd like to start off by talking about, well, let's have the basics right. Sometimes it seems very obvious to your clients, to the small businesses, what the finance is for. But they are not very good at articulating it. So in terms of knowing what exactly, why do you need the finance? The client might think, it's obvious, I don't have stock. But when he submits the financials or his latest management accounts, you see that his stock levels are at the highest that they've ever been. So what's going on there? Is it stock that he's got that's obsolete? Or it may be that with some of the small businesses, they often don't separate their personal finances from business finances. So if it's a, let's say, bed and breakfast, they buy things for the bed and breakfast, but in there they slot also the household stock for food or cleaning materials, and that pushes up your stock even when you don't have any guests. So it's important to first check through with your clients, what are they actually applying for funding, and does that come evidently through in their either application or in the business plan that they've submitted if they have had to submit one. Then secondly, how much, and not approximate, but exact. Get quotes if it's equipment. Make sure you've included things like transportation charges, possible contingencies for exchange rate fluctuations. For things like working capital, is it stock or is it creditors? Are you not able to, is it because your debtors are running away from you in terms of people that you are chasing, they are paying you on 60 days and your creditors are squeezing you? What are the exact challenges in terms of your funding? Be able to elaborate on that. And another thing, when it's for working capital that's general, salaries, wages, overheads like marketing, make sure it's something that is not going to be repetitive. In other words, if you get the funding now, it's not something you'll have to come back for again in another 6 months, because your model is such that your business requires your overheads to continuously get funded. And then what type of funding is it that you require? Long-term, short-term? Typically, financiers would want to fund based on the asset life or the life of the asset or the type of asset or type of need you are financing. So if it's property, you'd have a longer period. If it's equipment, a bit shorter. If it's working capital, shorter still. Get to know what type of finance you require or your client requires. Also, what are the implications in terms of debt, equity, or grant? People generally try to run after grants. There's still quite a lot of work to do in them. The admin can be horrendous. There's certain milestones that you usually have to adhere to. With debt, as you can see, we're about to possibly go into another interest rate hike. And equity is also not the cheapest, because people tend to think, well, if my business is, if you say that I'm overgeared, I've got too much debt in my business, then why don't you take up some equity? But equity works on the basis that you put in a certain amount for your shares, I put in a certain amount for my shares. So if the financier is the one who is putting in most of the money, then the financier is going to be the one who's going to own most of the company, which is not ideal. And then also look at what are you prepared to do to get that funding, and at the same time, how far will you go? Where is your cutoff? Financiers often ask for surety, for security. Are you willing to provide your house? Are you willing to provide surety for the business in your personal capacity? Know at which point you are going to stop. And as well as when I say is half a loaf better than no bread, that really refers to some financial institutions, typically banks, work on ratios. If you ask for 2 million, the bank will do their ratio calculation and say, well, you only qualify for 1.7 million. Does it make sense for you to take that money? Because if it's equipment, are you going to be still able to get that equipment at a lesser amount? Or is it better for you to walk away? So those are the type of things you'd want to be able to think around even before you apply for finance. And then, of course, other things are like making sure all your documents are up to date, relevant, things like your company documents, and that your client has actually read them and knows what's in them. What is the importance of the MOI, Memorandum of Incorporation? What does the shareholders' agreement allow in terms of who in the company is authorized to apply for finance? Is it enough for a director to do it, or does there need to be a resolution? And is the resolution from a majority of the shareholders or 75% of the shareholders? Because this may be a material item, what they call material items, where more than the vote, more than 75% of the voters have to agree within the company to have that resolution going forward. And then look at things like your financials. Make sure you have it, not necessarily audited financials. If your company is such that it doesn't require, according to the Companies Act, audited financials, you may have independent reviews, management accounts, but it's important for you to ensure the client knows what's in those financials. The client must be able to answer questions. Now, it doesn't have to be the technical details, but if your gross profit is generally 30%, and in 1 year it goes to 35 or 50%, you should be able to answer why, or your client should be able to answer why. And in your projections, be able to explain the assumptions that you have. Don't put in there things like, well, I'll get 2% of the Chinese market and I'm made, because 2% should be relatively easy to get. Moving on to things like your credit checks. First, do a credit check on yourself before you would go to a financial institution. It becomes embarrassing when the first time that you learn you've got an outstanding judgment from a medical aid is when the financier shows it to you and then asks you, why do you have this? And you can't answer. So make sure you do the checks before the financier does. And if there are issues there, be open and say, look, I had a problem. This is how I've solved it, or this is how I'm going about it. I am talking to that institution, or I have, my attorneys have been talking to the bank, to the courts to rescind that. What financial institutions, and it depends on the type again, some will not allow finance if you've got a judgment. Others want to know, are you a serial defaulter, or is it a once-off problem? In which case there's a much more leniency than if you are every year having a problem with your Foschini account going and there's a judgment on it. And then things like get letters of references, letters of intent from possible future clients, especially if you are a startup. And then in terms of things like your trade certifications, liquor licenses, that's also important. I don't know whether there's a question. Some financiers say a letter of intent is not enough and they require offtake agreements. Why is that, and what is the difference between the two? Okay, so I think just to quickly answer that, it's different for different financial institutions, but the difference between an offtake agreement is a actual, call it contract. They're actually contractually saying, yes, we will buy from you. Whereas a letter of intent just says, we like your product, we like how it is, and if X, Y, and Z is in place, we are probably going to buy from you, but it's not committed. It's not a commitment from their side. If there's more that we would like to discuss, we can do that a bit later. I think in terms of, yes, how do I get my next slide? Why is my slide not moving? Is that the next one? Okay, so
Perfect.
That's generally the list of. You typically would start off with bootstrapping, meaning you strap yourself up. You try and exhaust your own savings. Then you go to family and friends. Sometimes that's an acronym that's actually triple F. They say sometimes it's family, friends, and fools, because apart from family and friends, nobody should really would be looking at your business when you're at that stage of development, when you don't have a track record yet. Then investors and venture funds in South Africa, that is not very common at present. And I know a lot of people say, well, I wish I had an angel investor, I had or a venture funder. But they are also quite strict, and they will take quite a bit of, often you might after a while think they might not be an angel, but more like a devil investor after they take a couple of pounds of your flesh. Because the nature of how they work is that they invest maybe in 10 businesses and expect one to kick the lights out and pay for the other 9 that they expect to fail. And so they're really looking at very high growth potential, but with very big risk. Development finance institutions, I think we'll discuss that a bit more in detail as well, because I see out of the poll, there have been quite a few people who have gone there. You would know that they have a particular focus on a developmental focus that's more important for them, for instance, than having security. They would be looking at things like, okay, job creation. Is it rural or urban, township development, women entrepreneurs, youth, and so on. Other financial institutions, when I put like business partners, would typically be looking at what's the risk and what's the return that you get out of it, for which I have a separate slide. But to a large extent, we look at what is it that the business might lose, or other business partners as a financial institution might lose if the business fails, and we price according to that. Then the commercial banks, I'm not going to cover. I think most people would know what that is. Creditors are a good source of funding if you can stretch your creditors, but don't stretch them too far because they can liquidate you or apply for liquidation. Trade finance or invoice discounting, that's usually when you are a supplier or service provider to one of the blue chip companies, and you are doing work for them and you are invoicing them, but it takes 60 days or whatever the period is between when you invoice them and when they actually pay. To get some funding in that interim period, there's what you call invoice discounting companies or factoring companies that will pay you with less their fee, and then later they'll collect that money from your actual client. That requires you to have an agreement with your client that allows for the invoice discounting company to collect from them. Enterprise and supply development is a good source of funding if you can get it. Often there's grants in there. And then the other one is crowdfunding, which is also very recent in South Africa. It's still in its infancy, especially things like equity crowdfunding. But crowdfunding, the advantage with them is that they can actually show traction in the sense that you are putting yourself or your business plan, your idea onto a platform, and people who like that idea will contribute small amounts of money, whether it will be as debt, equity, but it's something that you can show, especially if there's a lot of people coming through and saying, yes, we like your idea, we'll contribute, even if it's 100 Rand each. But there's a lot of people, and you start gaining momentum, they might not reach your full amount of funding, but you can then go to a funder and say, well, look, I've raised so much already just through crowdfunding, which means that my product there's people interested in my product or service, which gives you a better power of negotiation with a financier who can fund the balance. And then the ones that I've put there as fintechs, that's typically the ones that are quick in being able to provide finance based on your cash flow. The types of Lulaland, business fuel, retail capital that deal with financing mainly working capital up to 36 months or so. So if I now look at the funding landscape, out of the companies we've spoken about, or the general types of companies, there are some that will finance you at the concept stage and startup, which is your venture type funders, as well as to some extent Shanduka. It should be Black Umbrellas. Shanduka is no longer part of the name. But your angel investors like 4DI, Savant here in Cape Town, there's not many at this stage, because one of the reasons is that, as you may have heard, 70 to 80% of businesses fail in their first 2 to 3 years. So at this stage, they're very high risky. So any financial institution being willing to go in there will either want a very high return or has a very developmental concept or a target in it. Most institutions would come in more at the growth stage and mature stage. So the growth stage, you would have the likes of your IDC, CIFA, NEF, business partners, and the tech companies that I was talking about. And then you have the banks that are really more interested in the mature, well-secured, where there is already a good pattern of revenue coming in. So if we look at what each entity does, you need to, before you approach them, try and do your research as much as possible. What is their mandate, which I've spoken about, for instance, for DFIs, also what is the amount that they are authorized to provide. For instance, if you go to IDC and you want 1 million rand, they'll say, no, that's too little for us. Our mandate starts from 5 million. We'll send you to CIFA or business partners or someone else. So get to know for each financial institution what's their mandate, as well as their appetite for that particular industry, or what's their niche. Certain companies or financial institutions won't advertise it, but they are better off. You know historically that they are better off at doing certain things. For business partners, it might be property. For somebody else, it might be high-tech technology companies. And you need to then look at, because that has a bearing on how much I need to educate that financier on the type of business I have before they understand and are able to help me. Also, what are their requirements? They need audited financials, they need company documents, cash flows, and so on. Understand also their process. It's not good enough for you to go to a financial institution. They tell you, okay, you need to provide us an application, this, that, and the other. Once you've submitted that, you'll hear from us in due course. Ask and probe, okay, so what happens with your application once it goes in? What's the due diligence process? How long does it take? Does it need certain committees? Then what happens? If it gets approved, what happens thereafter? Are there legal agreements that have to be put together? How long does that take? How involved will the financier be? There are those that are more on your business, overlooking it, and there are those that are more in your business. Typically, your venture capitalists, angel investors want to be a lot more involved, or those that take up equity, whereas others would only talk about having the need to look at your business from the outside. So, and then of course, what is their pricing and efficiency? In a sense, fast money costs more. You will see that from the likes of your Lulaland. They can provide you with money within 48, maybe 36 hours, but the pricing would be at about, well, it may be from their side 2 to 3% per month, but you have to compare apples with apples. 2 to 3% per month ends up at 30 or more % per annum interest. So having done those kind of, that kind of research, look at, from a business perspective, financiers have different ways of analyzing businesses in their due diligence. If I give the example, first of all financiers want the business to be viable. Your business, that's a no-brainer. They're not going to fund you just because you are creating jobs, but you are not sustainable. On the other hand, we'll also need to look at what do they specifically assess. In a company like a financier like Business Partners would look at what we call the business risk. In other words, what is the industry you are in? What's the competition like? Or maybe what's the location of that business? Is it suitable? The entrepreneurial risk, who is the jockey? What's their experience? How good are they at coming back and being resilient? Also, sometimes, is it a question of if there's only one person that's the entrepreneur, or a team that gives more comfort in case something happens to the main person? And then what's the financial risk, which in some institutions is more important, in other, the developmental impact is more important. Financial risk speaks to, if the business fails, what can we get back? What's the level of security we have or collateral? Whereas for development finance institutions, it may be more important to analyze how many jobs is this business going to create? What's going to happen? Are you able to replace imports with it? So those things have a bearing then in terms of you being able to push that through in your business plan, depending on who your financier is. Some of the common challenges, incomplete information, that's a big one. Having to always ask for, no, you haven't submitted this. Please, we want you to submit your audited financials, not just for this year, but for last year as well. A big one is also an inability to explain financials. As I was speaking earlier about know what your numbers say, or inability to back up your projections with data. Why do you say your turnover will go up by 20%? Another common challenge is if you come to a financier and you've already got a lot of debt on your books, there's a limit to how much debt your business can carry. Reliance on having only one supplier. We've seen what happened in COVID with China, one customer, big risk. Or if you are the only person if you are the business and something happens to you, you get sick, then that's a big risk for the financier, because basically without you, there's no business. Look at compliance issues, tax, VAT, local authority, municipal areas, industry type compliance, HACCP, and so on. And look at what is, or rather one of the challenges we have is that sometimes there are good friends that have come together to form a company, but when there are problems in the company, they are not able to work them out. And so the shareholders' squabbles leads to the company being liquidated. Sometimes it can even be a husband and wife team that have not been in business before. When they go into business, they actually get divorced. And finally, just some of the tips, as I said, okay, so go prepared. Don't be afraid to negotiate up to a point. If you can't get certain things that you're very principled on, rather walk away. But you can negotiate up until the deal is approved. Don't try to negotiate after your deal has already been approved. That makes it a lot more difficult for whoever in the financial institution has been helping you to, or the business advisor in that financial institution, to have something approved from their committee and then find that, no, you didn't really want that, and go back to the committee, that's basically a red flag to say, no, this person wasn't negotiating in good faith. So do your negotiations up front. As I said previously, be honest. If you've got credit judgments or something, clear that up way before time. And borrow only what you need. Money should be there to make more money for you, not for you to plug holes, because then you'll keep plugging holes and you'll get used to plugging holes. You make sure that with this money, after you put this money in, you will not need to, at least for some time, come back to more money, to get more money, unless you are actually in a growth phase. Important contracts and agreements are there for a reason. When things are going well, you don't need them. But the minute something goes wrong, you will all go to those agreements to say, this is how we're governed. If you don't have them, then you're in trouble when things are wrong. So even with family and friends, have agreements in writing that can be verified. And finally, have a plan B with various scenarios, including what if I don't get finance from this person, or what if I only get half the funding? And I've also included a list of possible finance areas where you can go to look for finance. FinFind is a good site. SAFCA also has a list of financiers that may be beneficial to you. Now, I know I haven't really given much space for questions. I was trying to rush through because I do realize I'm actually over time, but I'd be very happy if some people can, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat or whether there's people that would like to also talk about their experiences. But I'll hand over to Tobeka because I know my time is up.
No problem. Thank you so much. But don't go away just yet, because I think it's a nice segue for us just to go back quickly on the results from the poll and just kind of connect the dot there between what you said. What are people more comfortable? What have our clients' behavior been around?
Yes.
The experience and who we usually use. Go ahead.
Yes, I see that out of the first poll, a considerable number, 63%, have got or approached finance from government agencies. And the second was the commercial banks and then other development financiers. I am impressed that the largest portion in terms of the satisfaction is actually satisfactory, considering that a lot went to government agencies, because normally we hear that government agencies have not provided the service that was expected, or in any case, any financial institution to have provided excellent service or good service or satisfactory service is, I think in my books, impressive, because I'm used to hearing only about how poor and how bad the service has been in one area or another. So I think in terms of maybe improving some of the satisfactory levels by having your client have information that is more pertinent to that particular institution might increase the level of satisfaction and the expectation. Like I was saying, there is almost a trade-off between the amount or the cost of funding and the speed with which you'll get it. It's not directly proportional, but you'll probably get much quicker turnaround times from your fintechs that charge a much higher interest rate than from your development finance institutions and even organizations like business partners, though we're probably more somewhere in the middle. The challenge is often that you want to because you are unsecured, you want to make sure of the viability of the business. That takes more time, and sometimes there's also bureaucratic processes. So for me, the fact that there is a fairly good level, or not good, but a level of satisfaction is impressive. I don't know if anybody maybe would like to raise what some of the issues have been when going for finance, or what has been, especially from those who have had poor levels of finance, what have been some of the issues. I see that two participants raised their hands. I'm not sure how to get to them.
Nikita, yes, I think it would be prudent us getting a viewpoint from somebody who's been highly disappointed or had a bad experience. But I think that 5% success rate that we saw in the poll is equally beneficial, maybe hearing from one or two who've actually had successful applications. Particularly, I think I would recommend it if we could get somebody because the government agency poll rate was very high. I would recommend it that we please hear from somebody that got a successful application from any other entity other than maybe one from the government, but it would be important, prudent, getting feedback from somebody that applied with a different sector, fintech, private, friends, family, foes, or fools, as it were. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to manage I don't actually see who's got their hands up.
Yes, let me manage that for you. I was kicked out, but I think let me start first with the chat, because those are the questions that I can see here. Unless Pilati Moyo, if you're somebody who is responding to Nikita's question, please unmute yourself and share your thoughts or your experience, and then we will attend to the questions in the chat. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Pilati. Hello.
No, I think I'm unmuted.
No,
There are no questions.
Oh, okay. So please, if you could just drop your hand there. Let me proceed to the chat then. Nikita, there's a question here that says, please tell us if we can apply for, I think people really want to understand who Business Partners is all about. Do you assist with those that are seeking funding, and or are you part and parcel to some of these transactions? Say, for example, if you've got a business owner who's got a really lucrative business idea, would your company be the kind that says we want equity and we can actually help you with submitting for funding? Please kind of give us a drawdown of how Business Partners actually operates and how you position yourself as it relates to your consulting services.
Okay, thank you for the question. So Business Partners provides finance exclusively to small businesses. For us, it's really, as one of the slides showed, we look at what is the business risk, what is the entrepreneurial risk, and what's the financial risk. We provide funding anything from $500,000 up to $50 million to formal small businesses, meaning you have to be registered. You also need to have a company, you need to have registration papers. Generally, we look at companies that are at least over a year old. We would really I wouldn't say we never look at startups completely, but they'd have to be very novel. We do have a portion that's more of a semi-venture fund, but that's a very small part of our business. The majority of our business is businesses that have been in existence for at least 2-3 years, that are already employing people, even if it's few. It's anywhere within the country. What we do is we look at what is the risk, and for that risk, what sort of return we want. And then we can look at whether it's term loans, equity, or what we call a royalty. It's all used to get to the type of returns we want. So For instance, we mainly look at what is the business able to generate in terms of cash. So that would often determine whether it would be a loan and equity or a loan and a royalty. Because typically our finance would be a term loan at prime, but for the risk that we are taking, in other words, where if the business fails, business partners also loses money. For that portion, we would want to have a premium above prime. It might be prime plus 5, it might be prime plus 6, depending on what the business is like. And that's where we look at either taking equity if the business might not be generating cash now, enough cash now, but maybe doing that later. And then we'd want the client or the entrepreneur to buy our shares at market value at a date further down the line, or where typically things like your franchises, let's say steers, that do generate cash, and it doesn't make sense for us to have equity in it, we would then have, on top of these steers royalty, another royalty for the amount, for the risk that we are taking that's above the amount that we're secured for. I don't know if that answers the question, but what I'm trying to say is that the instruments we use, whether it's loan, equity, royalty, is just a means to get to a particular return, and that we can negotiate around. We do, especially when we do take up equity, we do want to, as a shareholder, know what's happening in the business. We will insist on financial statements. We often would say, okay, would want you, maybe if there's some shortcomings we see in either your knowledge or your system, to have technical assistance, which is another avenue that we would provide. Our technical assistance is basically an interest-free loan that's geared towards helping the main business, either for things like training, mentorship, putting in a marketing or website or financial system. So in a nutshell, we mainly do the financing, but we are also there to take up a position that helps the business, because if you lose money, business partners will also often lose money. So it's in our interest. Maybe that's long-winded.
Yes, but I do think that you gave us a sufficient answer. Essentially, yes, you know, it is a yes in terms of whether you assist and or buy into companies that are looking for financial assistance, if I understood you well. But that too, entrepreneurs need to be prepared to assume some level of risk, particularly if the uptake is not promising, but the projections are instead showing some kind of a positive trajectory, and therefore enabling or affording them the opportunity to buy back their stake once after the business has taken shape.
Yeah, I see. Okay, I'm not looking at all the things in the chat. I wonder whether, because in the Q&A, there's only one question.
Yes.
People seem to be putting their questions in the chat, and there's quite a lot of items in the chat. The question I can see on the Q&A says, some financiers like the NEF do not encourage the use of consultants to assist in the application of funding. How does one go about helping a client in this case? Well, I'm not sure how the NEF looks at that. I know that often what we want, and including the NEF, is that the client should be able to answer certain questions. We've previously seen instances, both when I was at the IDC as well, where a small business goes to a consultant. The consultant draws up a business plan that he basically takes off the shelf, fills in the numbers or fills in certain portions of it and hands it to the client. And then the client goes to the financier, and then the financier asks, okay, so this part of your business plan, can you explain it? And then the client can't do that. I think that is what NEF is probably trying to avoid. To what extent, I mean, if you use a consultant, but the consultant is actually a good consultant, and most good consultants would really be asking you the questions and putting your answers into your business plan into a particular format. If you take that and go to whether it's NEF or somewhere else, knowing fully what's in that business plan and not requiring the NEF to pay for that consultant out of the funding that you are going to get. It can't be that to put your business plan together, the NEF or any other financial institution still has to pay that consultant, or you are paying that consultant based on the success rate, and therefore the money that NEF calculates should go to you is instead going to the consultant, or some of it. I think that's the challenge that we're having with some of the consultants, but I don't think it's a blanket approach. I stand to be corrected.
If I can just come in there, Mr. Nikita, we still haven't gotten any indication of the initial question, which was we wanted to hear from the attendees, those that have had a downside experience or an unpleasant experience with their applications. And most importantly, the 5% that we saw there with the success outcome. If one of you could please kind of share your thoughts and experience as to what contributed to you getting a favorable outcome, I think it would really serve the room or those that are here well, hearing from both of you. In the meantime, Nikita, we've got a comment here from a participant. Sam Maloka says, he says, we don't have a good record of business partners successfully financing SMMEs. He says, I like a similar model of commercial bank, very much undevelopmental. Mr. Maloka, could you please unmute yourself and maybe elaborate on your comment there for context?
Should we bring him in? Yeah. Should we bring?
Yes,
him in?
please.
Yeah. Let's bring him in. Okay. We'll do that in a minute. Where is he? But we have some hands as well.
Yes.
Okay. Sam, is he in? Go ahead, Sam.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Please go ahead,
Sam,
sir.
please go ahead.
Put me in a corner. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I'll be happy if business partners perhaps can share us their success stories as well on financing SMMEs, BEEs, and so forth. And so, as I say, we don't have a record. Probably there is, that is not out there in public, and perhaps they could share that, and it will change perhaps our perception. And that is perhaps my comment.
Well, business partners at present, I stand to be corrected about the numbers, but we've got probably about 1,000 clients on our books that we are currently financing. Yes, the vast majority, I would say, are more established small businesses, but I mean, I can speak, I'm based in the Western Cape. I know I've got clients that are in Khayelitsha, I've got clients in Delft, I've got in Athlone. So I'm not sure, I'd like to know what the specifics are. Maybe let me explain perhaps a bit more the difference between your government, fully government DFIs and business partners. Business partners is run on a purely commercial basis. We don't get any money from the government. We also don't even get any money from the shareholders. And incidentally, government in the business partners has a 20% shareholding. But our profit, or the way that we say sustainable, is purely from financing small businesses. So our cost of funding is somewhat generally higher than your development finance institutions. And although we have as our target, we have targets for Black business, we have targets for female-owned businesses, but that does not decide, that's not a decider on the interest rate we charge. So where your development finance institutions may have a leniency in terms of the interest they charge because it is a township or Black-owned or female entrepreneur, we don't have that. We do have as our targets as personnel that we need to get to 50% of our funding to go out to Black SMMEs. That's our target. We get measured on that. But we are not going to, we don't reduce the cost of funding to those SMMEs. In that sense, we're not as developmental. On the other hand, we are somewhat able to be quicker, and our requirements are probably not as stringent as development finance institutions. We are willing to look at, okay, you've been in business, talk to us, we will make a plan. You do not necessarily have to have a full business plan. We can engage with you, whereas the DFIs have a much stricter criteria on the documentation, perhaps, that they have to bring in. So from a point of view of developmental impact, yes, we have that as a target, but not to the same extent as developmental as DFIs. But to say that what's our success rate, we have had quite a good success rate in all our areas of whether it's Black-owned, female-owned, or established businesses. There is, of course, yes, there is certain limitations, and we try and help those. That's why we use mentorship and technical assistance. So I would like to maybe unpack where your perception comes from. If I may, Sam? Or maybe Sam is gone off.
It will be interesting that now that you're saying that, where he probably has applied and hasn't been successful. But let me ask you this, Nikita, while we get someone else in possibly. Where do most of us fall short? And I don't know, maybe we've asked this question already since I was booted off. Maybe that will help, Sam. Where do most, and it's where do most small businesses fall short when they apply with you guys?
I think firstly on the information side, in terms of having information and proof of viability, being able to show viability, that your business is sustainable. I think it comes back to knowing your numbers, whether it's historical or projections. Because for us, for instance, you know, there's some institutions that will say, well, for you to get finance, you should have been profitable all the years or the last 5 years. We have businesses that have not been profitable 1 year, then profitable the next, and then because of COVID, they've been unprofitable. But we can see certain trends or trajectories that says to us, this year, they'll probably be able to get to a certain level. What may also be a problem is that where businesses don't have collateral, and our pricing is often based on that. So if a business does not have security in terms of either a property or equipment that they can put up, then the pricing goes up. And if the pricing goes up, maybe then the viability gets affected. That may be an issue. But on the whole, I think business partners, especially, I think in this period, has been looking to actually do a lot more funding of Black businesses in particular, where there hasn't, for some reason, where we haven't done it, we would usually state that, okay, this is why we haven't been able to fund you. Either because we don't see mainly because we don't see the viability, either because you have not shown it to us or we're not able to extract it from you, or we think it's not a sustainable business in the long term, or it's got too much debt already. But I'd welcome anybody of the participants who has had experience with business partners and not been successful, and we can engage outside of the workshop as to looking at why maybe there was the application was rejected.
Yeah. If we could refer then to the Q&A there, Mr. Nikita. Zarko's got 2 questions regarding securities and collateral required to secure funding. I think maybe the reference is in, it would probably reference business partners, presumably.
What form of securities and collateral required in order to secure funding?
Correct.
As I was trying to explain earlier, there isn't a specific form of security we want. Security has a bearing on the cost of funding. So for instance, if you're applying for a loan of 1 million rand and you have a house, let's say your house is worth 2 million rand and there's a bond from IBASA on it, but you've paid off 1 million of that and there's equity in it of 1 million, then we look at it and say, okay, there is quite reasonable security, there's still equity in there. So your cost of funding, and I'm not going to throw around actual numbers, but your cost of funding would be less than if you come and say, okay, I have a house, but it's fully bonded to IBASA, so there's no equity in it. So if the business fails, business partners is not able to recover anything. In that case, our cost of funding will be a lot higher. That's where the difference is. And sometimes because the cost of funding is higher, that plays into the viability of the business. Because if the return required based on that security is high, and the business is just barely making it or is profitable, but not is hardly just profitable, then we might say, well, you know what, this doesn't make sense for us in the sense that we can't get to the return we want for the risk that we're taking. I don't know if that answers the question. Okay, the other question here I see is, do you actually become partners in that business that is funded until the loan has been settled, or how does it go? So what we do is, at the time that we are looking at assessing your business for funding, we do the due diligence. We look at the different aspects and we might say, okay, in this business, you are good at operating, whether it's your bed and breakfast or your restaurant, but we somehow feel you are not very good at marketing. Maybe we'll need to, apart from give you, we believe enough in the business and in your ability to fund you, but we want to support it because we are also at risk. And we want to give you a mentor for your marketing, or we want to give you a better financial system as part of the package. That is where technical assistance comes in. And often with that technical assistance, we'll put in a mentor, or somebody from business partners like myself would be involved on a regular basis, maybe once every 2 months, have meetings, sometimes every month, have meetings and see how the business is doing. Once the business is okay, then those meetings can be less. But where we take up equity as one of the ways we are funding that business, it is a requirement that we have at least once a year an annual general meeting. We would also want to get financial statements. Often we would want management accounts from the business to see how things are going and then be able to make suggestions and recommendations. It doesn't mean that we are going to force what we think on you, but we would say we are aware of X, Y, Z. We think this is what could be beneficial to you. It's up to you to decide, but at the end of the day, if you don't take the advice and the business fails, then we would be going after whatever security we have taken for the risk that we're taking.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikita. Sorry, I see all our lovely hands. They must be tired from raising their hand. So Abraham, you next. Literally we have 5 minutes. So I will bring you in also, Zach. Yeah, I'll bring you in, Given and the rest. Go ahead, Abraham. Let me not take any more time. You can ask your question. Let's unmute you. Hi, can you speak, please? Okay. Maybe there's a network delay. Okay, can we bring in Tuli then to speak? I think Abraham must have a network problem.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes.
Budi.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Nikita, for the presentation. Firstly, I think I'm a business accountant myself. So I do work with clients, SMEs. I do have 2 success stories. Last year we applied, 2 of my clients were applying for funding with the business partners. And the consultant there was very helpful, Mr. Chabang Mohapi. And I did supported them with the preparation of financial statements, and they were successful. So they got the funding and they were happy. That is first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, on my question, because I do also have some clients who've got an interest in applying for a franchise of the retail stores. So I wanted to check what are the requirements. I did put it on the chat as well, but I don't think I got an answer. I wanted to check what are the requirements if someone is applying for funding to do a franchise. And I heard you saying that you look at the business that is like 1 or 2 years old with the employees and all that. But now the issue is with SMEs, you find that some people got an idea or got an interest in the franchise, yet they haven't done a business before. They don't have any existing business, but now they do have a passion and maybe an experience of working in a retail or all those things. And the company is new. Now, how do you deal with such a situation in terms of making sure that they also benefit? Because there are those people who don't have an experience, don't have a record, don't have even financials, but they do have an interest in investing in the franchise businesses. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. Because with franchises, it is a bit different in the sense that you've got a franchisor. So we would finance somebody who is approved by the franchisor, and especially if they've had other businesses before or experience. But even if they don't, we would have to look at the specifics of that particular franchise, because franchises have a very wide range. Some franchises, the franchisor is very helpful and is very close by to the entrepreneur, assisting all the time. Other franchises are more like just distribution centers. I'm thinking of the likes of Timber City or one of those where they can buy things for you and they call it a franchise and you buy from them, but they don't really help you in running much of your business. So depending on the level of support that the franchisor is able to provide to a franchisee, would be evaluating both the client who is applying for finance, in other words, the franchisee, and what the franchise model is. And we have previously funded a lot of franchises where the owner was completely new, but the franchisor was good. And the franchisor, because we also engage with the franchisor to say, okay, we want to understand your systems. Yes, this one we know is already a good system, whether it's a McDonald's, Steers, so on. And we work with the franchisor to say, yes, this person we think could be a suitable applicant for finance, even though he has never had a business before. With franchises, that's a bit of a different kettle of fish, because there is already to some level support mechanism. I don't know if that answers your question.
Great, thank you. I'm sure he'll comment in the chat. Because I'm aware we have a few minutes and there's questions and there's people's hands. Let's just have one more voice, and then we'll take the Q&A section as well. Mfenyana, go ahead.
Please give Given a chance also there.
Yeah, I will. Yes, I will.
Okay.
We'll get there. Because I just work from top to bottom, that's why. But he's not, they're not unmuting. Let me ask to unmute. Let me see if Mfenyana has something to say. Okay, Given's given up. Given, don't give up now. I'm giving you a chance, Given. Go ahead, unmute yourself, but okay, you're on mute, Given. We're also having network problems.
Yeah, load shedding. You see, we need more entrepreneurs to deal with load shedding and find solutions for us.
Okay, so we're going to Q&A then. Did you find anything there, Mrs. Mercy? Do you want to?
No, I was actually going to suggest the same. In fact, for both Given and Mfenyana, if their questions are brief, they can perhaps just jot them in the chat. In the meantime, we'll cross floor to the Q&A.
Okay, let me look at the Q&A. First at the top, I see from Aubrey. Does business partners model involve the use of pre-approved external service providers, consultants to help SMME clients preparing funding? Okay, so with business partners, well, how we actually market our services to clients is we often have what we call intermediaries. That is business consultants, accountants, maybe lawyers. In other words, people who interact with small businesses that could potentially become our clients. You might be an accountant to a small business, and business partners would bring those intermediaries from time to time, maybe for a breakfast presentation, to understand how business partners' products work in more detail, so that if one of their clients asks about maybe they need finance, or they get to know that, especially if you're an accountant for a small business and you know that they need funding, then you would be able to suggest business partners as an alternative, because you already know what business partners products are. And those intermediaries do get, as part of business partners marketing efforts, they do get a percentage commission on the deals that business partners approves and disburses out. Okay, so that is in terms of the question around external service providers. We also have, as I said, mentors that we help, and a lot of those mentors are business consultants that would be on our books on a need-to basis. So we have quite an extensive database, but they're not employed full-time by business partners. If we see a particular client has a need for a particular service, and we have one of the business consultants as a mentor on our database, we'd either put the two of them together, or we would recommend that the client takes on technical assistance, and with that technical assistance can pay for the services of that mentor. Okay, now I don't know whether my screen has...
Okay, we're speed dating. Let me throw you with a question. So here it is. Yes. What is the exit strategy of business partners should a client ask for equity funding?
Okay, very good question. So at the time that we do the deal, we say, okay, based on the risk profile and so on, for our funding, apart from the term loan, would maybe take on a 10% shareholding in the business at nominal value at that point in time. And before you repay the full loan, you as the entrepreneur have to buy out business partners after year 3, but before the end of the full term loan. And that can be done in tranches, which is usually the case. So the exit strategy is negotiated up front, that you know, okay, this is how much we project the value of the company will be in 4 years' time if you want to exit at that point in time. If you exit earlier, it would be a bit less. If you exit later, it may be a bit more. But that is all something that we discuss at the start when we actually approve the deal.
Great. Thank you. We literally have 1 minute for 2 questions. Do you offer financial support to SMMEs, or are there other types of support available to help business grow? And then the other question, if you can consolidate somehow, do you want a separate business plan when applying for franchise businesses, or what is your basic requirement?
Okay. In terms of financial support to SMEs, we have other support in terms of mentorship and technical assistance. That's our main focus, is financial support to SMEs. But like we started the presentation with saying, okay, I was involved where we're looking at helping aspiring entrepreneurs, and we have a business plan competition. We also have an Entrepreneur of the Year competition for more established businesses. We have mentors and technical assistance, but the main focus is really finance. On the second question, do we want a separate business plan when applying for franchise businesses? Look, for us, it doesn't matter whether it's a franchise business or any type of business. You come to us, you give us what you've got, we can discuss that and tell you, okay, we need more information on here or there. We don't have a standard business plan that we accept. On our website, we have a suggestion of a business plan, but sometimes if a business has been in existence and we get financial information on the history and you can do projections, then we can actually talk to you, and as you talk to you, put together your business plan that we can submit to our management. It's not as if we have a standard that this and this and this and this has to be in our business plan.
Great, thank you very much, Nikita. So what's your final word in 1.5 minutes?
I think in the current situation, there's a lot of challenges for small businesses. And I mean, we're all aware that load shedding, interest rate hikes, and so on. The best thing that you can do with financial institutions is to try and be as open as possible, as soon as possible. If you get finance from an institution and you are in trouble, don't wait till the trouble becomes so big that then the only alternative for the institution is to liquidate you and take the security that you have. Because the earlier you come through, the more the chances of having a solution. It's always better to have a business solution than a legal solution. So we are in the business of funding SMMEs, exclusively SMMEs. We want to try and help them. So the better the relationship we can garner with SMEs, and the more the information can flow, the more chances of being able to help a business. When you go the legal route, nobody really wins. So for us, it's also as important to try and find a business solution rather than a legal solution. I'd also please encourage people to apply. I'd also encourage the members of IBASA to get in touch. We are always on the lookout for intermediaries. that through whom we can get to small businesses. And as I said, there is a certain commission that we pay to the business advisors that have brought that business if we end up funding it. Yeah, and everybody is welcome to contact me. I've got colleagues all over the country. I can put you in touch with the ones that are closest to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mfenyana. Go ahead, Mercy.
No, I was just going to say, if you had a slide with his contact details, if you could just share that, or at least project it in the meantime as we close the session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
or we can put it in the chat, because we're just going to share some stuff now on the screen. So on that note, I don't know, but Bonnie, do you want to say anything? Any thoughts in 30 seconds?
Yeah, thank you, Tobeka. Let me take this opportunity to thank all the participants, the host as well, and the presenter Nikita for a very well-planned and well-presented topic. We appreciate your presence, guys, and your participation. We look forward to having you again next month. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And before I hand it over to Mercy, I'll show her slide as well. Just as usual, remember for your clients, if they or yourself, that we have this monthly biz clinic that's here for you. Please, we will join us on the first Friday of February, which is next Friday, for 1 hour. So feel free to attend that. And then after that, also we have our next event, which is Become a Professional Service Provider to ESD or SME program. And the date and more details will be sent soon. So we look forward to seeing you there. And then, of course, the SEDA has just shared theirs. Thank you very much. If you need to be in touch with SEDA, that's their contact details. Mercy, over to you.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to say that my parting shot for the day is that clearly the SMME sector now knows that there are additional resources outside of the quote-unquote status quo institutions. And thank you, sir, Mr. Nikita, for sharing your invaluable insights. I think from here on, you can expect ample inroads of a plethora of inquiries, if not people who are reasserting applications that weren't initially successful for reasons that you've enlightened us on today. Thank you so much. And obviously for IBASA, it's ibasa.org.za. Thank you all for your participation today.
Great. And yeah, please do go onto the IBASA website. You will also find the recordings or information on our webinar, this one and the next. No, there won't be emails on the presentation. However, you can watch this on YouTube as well. The EPI has their YouTube link. Anyway, on that note, it was great having you all here. Thank you again, Nikita, for your time and your precious time. It was very insightful. And now put Boni and Poti and Mercy, Danki Galebuga, I'm assuming, all the way from Jozi. And Rai, thank you very much for being our technical support today in the absence of, hey, people are laughing at me. I know, Sitsona-sam leaves a lot to do. Yeah. Anyway, and Ryan, thank you for being here. Christoph, we missed you, but we just keep making the circle bigger. Thank you, Mercy, for being my co-host. It was great working with you, even when technicality just threw us off. And as usual, have fun today, have fun this week, take care of yourself, be kind. Kindness is still my word, even in 2023. And take care of not just yourself, but mentally and spiritually and physically, and your colleagues and your family and your loved ones and your friends. See you next month. Cheers then. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye. So, that's what I'm doing.
I would have to reassert you and say that, or reaffirm you and say, you did well, Sister Tobeka.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Yes.